Peace. This is Wise for Wise Words Media back at y'all for another round. And fight fans, for the past week, there has been a war of words and actions taken by both the WBC and their president, Mauricio Sulaiman, and Terrence Crawford. This stems back to last week during the WBC convention when Mauricio Sulaiman states that Terrence Crawford will be stripped of the WBC title for non-compliance because he refused to pay upwards of $300,000 for sanctioning fees from the WBC. Terrence Crawford goes on to say, Mauricio Sulaiman and the WBC were the only sanctioning body that was telling him he had to pay an even higher price than the other sanctioning bodies. And Crawford states that it's because Mauricio Sulaiman thinks the green belt is the best belt in boxing, and he thinks it holds more prestige than the others, so he tried to overcharge him for that and whatever the case may be. But you know what's happening for real? And in response also, Mauricio Sulaiman, which is really petty, but what's happening in response also, Mauricio Sulaiman said that Terrence Crawford will never fight another ranked opponent in the WBC. So in other words, what he's trying to say is Terrence Crawford will never ever become undisputed champion in any other weight class again. Because, so here's what's happening. This war that's going on verbally and on the surface level between Crawford and Mauricio Sulaiman is really a war that's going on. It's deeper than that. It's really a war that's going on between Mauricio Sulaiman and some of the other sanctioning bodies, but mainly him and the WBC, against Turki Al-Sheikh, TKO, and Ring Magazine. That's the real war. Terrence Crawford pledged his allegiance to Turki Al-Sheikh, and therefore all these things that are taking place between Mauricio and Terrence Crawford are really a reflection. These are really indirect shots taken to Turki Al-Sheikh and his attempt to form one sanctioning body in boxing. So Turki Al-Sheikh has plans of only having one belt, which is the ring belt, which is one of the most historic, it's one of the oldest belts in boxing history. And it, that alone gives it some prestige. However, the ring has been out the loop, so to speak, since the 4-belt era. Really since the 3-belt era, and then the 4th belt came in about some 20, 25 years ago. But that's the real reason why Terrence Crawford and Mauricio Sulaiman, that's one of the two main reasons, but that's one of the main reasons. It's because there's a war going on between both of them. And Turki Al-Sheikh and Terrence Crawford are close. Mauricio Sulaiman and Canelo Alvarez are close, which leads to another problem. Another reason all this is happening is because Mauricio Sulaiman, being the hypocrite that he is, he's mad that Terrence Crawford beat Canelo Alvarez. He's mad because this was supposed to be the fight that propels Canelo Alvarez over Floyd Mayweather. This was supposed to make him one of the top 5 greatest fighters of all time. Even though he was 3 weight classes bigger than Terrence Crawford, they were going to use the name Terrence Crawford and use that victory, even though it wasn't a balanced, equal fight. And they were going to use that to propel Canelo's name and status to be in the top 5 of all time because he beat Terrence Crawford. Mauricio Sulaiman even went as far as to make a custom WBC belt for the winner of that fight. He just was so confident Canelo was gonna win. So much so that Turki Al-Sheikh, who was throwing this event between Canelo and Crawford, he said that he doesn't want the WBC stepping into the ring to give, you know, whatever belt to Terence Crawford or to the winner, so to speak. Mauricio Sulaiman got so upset, he released a comment before the fight talking about he better have a whole building worth of security if he thinks he's gonna stop me. I'm getting in that ring. Like, he was adamant about getting in the ring to present this custom WBC belt to the winner because he thought it was gonna be Canelo. So he was adamant that he was gonna get in that ring and present a belt to Canelo. Well, in that fight, you know, a few moments later, after the fight, Mauricio Sulaiman went up there with a cheap half smile and presented the belt. Like, he was upset that Terence Crawford won that fight. He half-heartedly gave him that custom belt, and he was so upset about that. He was so upset that Canelo lost to Crawford and that he had to present Crawford with this custom WBC belt. And that enraged him so much that he wanted to strip Terence Crawford. And here's the hypocrisy of Mauricio Sulaiman, because Mauricio Sulaiman, being the WBC president, he never stripped Canelo Alvarez of that WBC belt. Canelo Alvarez had David Benavidez as his #1 contender. David Benavidez was the #1 contender for that WBC belt for more than 3 years. And he chased Canelo, and he called Canelo's name out, and he did everything he could to get that Canelo fight. And instead, what Canelo did was he fought the guys like Avni Yildirim, he fought guys like John Ryder, fought guys like a 42-year-old Gennady Golovkin. He did everything he could to not fight Dimitri Bivol, and the WBC never stripped him. They never stripped him of that belt because Mauricio Sulaiman and the WBC stands for We Built Canelo. Canelo, like I've been telling you on this page over and over again, was nothing more than a marketing puppet. He was nothing more than a marketing scheme to carry boxing into the next generation. You see, before some of y'all say, oh, well, they're stripping Terence Crawford because he didn't pay the sanctioning fees. That's why he's getting stripped. Well, check this out. They quick to strip him. They won't strip Canelo Alvarez, even though he hasn't fought his WBC mandatory in more than 5 years. He never fought that WBC mandatory, and they're willing to strip him. Yet Terence Crawford, for one fight, they strip him right away. Same thing with Devin Haney. When Devin Haney moved up in weight to fight Regis Prograis, they stripped Devin Haney of the 135-pound belt immediately. The moment he announced he's going up to fight Regis Prograis, they stripped Devin Haney instantly. Meanwhile, Canelo Alvarez is able to go up in weight, and in that time it was because they said, oh, because he's going up in weight, he's moving up in weight. So they forced him to go up in weight. They forced him to move. Pardon me. They forced him to give up the belt when he moved up in weight. And now, suddenly, Devin Haney gets stripped. So you see how he's quick to strip Devin Haney, Terence Crawford, quick to strip these guys. But Canelo Alvarez could hold on to that belt for dear life for like 3-4 years without defending it to David Benavidez, and nothing happens to him. They even protected Canelo so much that they made up this make-believe belt or status designation called the franchise belt. You notice now how ever since Canelo Alvarez doesn't have those same David Benavidez problems, that franchise belt is gone. You don't hear about it anymore. And it's simply because that belt, or status as he puts it, was created so that Canelo would not have to fight any of his mandatories, because that was part of being elevated to franchise status. You are no longer obligated to fight any mandatories. See how they sneak that in? See how they sneak in when Canelo Alvarez got caught for clenbuterol? See how they elevated the levels of clenbuterol one could have in their body as soon as Canelo Alvarez get caught with clenbuterol? The WBC is the most hypocritical sanctioning body in all of boxing. And this is the reason why Turki Al-Sheikh wants to clean up the sport, and he wants to make one sanctioning body, one belt, the Ring magazine, to avoid all of these politics, to this guy doesn't want to fight this guy because he's running away, just like Canelo ran away from Jamel Charlo and Demetrius Andrade when they were his #1 contenders, and he fought Avni Yildirim because Avni Yildirim was his mandatory. But then after he beats Yildirim and Charlo still his mandatory, he says no, he's not going to fight his mandatory. So he picks and chooses when he wants to fight a mandatory. So the Ring magazine, the Ring belt, will stop all of that. And this is what the real beef between Crawford and Sulaiman is about. It's not between them two personally. It's more between Sulaiman and Turki Al-Sheikh. And he knows that Crawford is the face of Turki Al-Sheikh right now. So he is taking this war out on Turki Al-Sheikh by going at Terence Crawford. And Terence Crawford's with the smoke. You know, Bud, he don't run away from nothing. So Bud is laughing at him. But, yep, that's really what the whole thing is about. It's really about that. It's really that there's a war going on between the Ring and the sanctioning bodies, namely the most vocal out of them all being Mauricio with the WBC. And it's just basically a war between the two. But yeah, I'm Waz for Waz Words Media. That's all I got for now. Peace.